ADHD Rewired, episode 536. Since 2014, this has been the podcast for ADHD adults who have really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. I'm Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and an ADHD certified clinical services provider by training and a coach by design. I'm your host, and I have ADHD. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. You can learn about our coaching and accountability groups, our virtual co-working community, and more, all at ADHDrewired.com. We are wired for connection, and you are not alone. Learn more about our offerings, including our monthly live Q&As, get additional resources for every episode, including links to any resources we mention on today's show. You can support us on Patreon, sign up for our email newsletter, and more, all at ADHDrewired.com. And if this is your first time listening, welcome. Don't forget to hit subscribe or follow on your podcast app so you never miss an episode. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. All right, welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired, Coaches Roundtable Edition. So we are right now we're in season 36 of our coaching groups, and we are going to be talking this week about our, we're in, as I said, week 6, where we talked about numbing and self-care and some of the differences between those two things, and sort of the impact of being very intentional about self-care and being more mindful about numbing behaviors. So say hello to Coach Kristen and Coach Brian. Hello. So, and just for listeners and viewers, we're kind of like a week behind doing these. So if there's the possibility of us bleeding into like next week's stuff, that's just because of our own ADHD and time. So, but let's just kind of dive right in. So one of the things that I think about when I think about self-care is through the lens of productivity. And I use this phrase that self-care is the bridge between productivity and self-care, right? So let's chat a bit about how that person has shown up for each of you and how we brought that to group.
Did you say self-care is the bridge between productivity and self-care?
I might have.
Yeah, because there needs to be a third thing, it feels like, because I don't know how to answer the question.
What did I say? We got the Fridays here. It's productivity. No, self-care is the bridge between Oh shit! What is it?
Intention and productivity.
Oh, I got it. It's planning is the bridge between productivity and self-care,
which is really important.
Yes, we're gonna leave this all in. Okay, so. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how we do planning, how we do self-care, and how that's connected, and why it's so important that that's connected, versus numbing, because some of the behaviors that we do for each can actually be the same, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think there is, what's the phrase? Something, you can do all things as long as it's in moderation type phrase.
All things in moderation, including moderation.
Yeah. But I like that the phrase that really took your brain a lot to get there, that planning is that bridge, because what I've learned and experienced is that we tend to ignore our self-care because we think we don't deserve it, or we think we're supposed to finish all our work before we can do anything that feels good to us. And self-care is that idea of rejuvenation, of allowing our brain to rest. And we think, oh, but we don't have everything done, so I can't do that. I'm not allowed to. So that planning piece in the middle, it's putting it down. It's adding to our intention to do it, and it's saving a space for it. Which to me, if you put it in your planner for Friday night, I'm going to the movies with my family, that's self-care to me. It's also helping my family interaction and dynamics and all those relationships. And it's okay that I do it because I already have it in my planner. I've already hashed it all out during my planning time. And so it releases some of that guilt that I might feel when I go, oh, time to leave the office, go into the movie. I don't have to go
Yeah.
through oh, should I go? Should I finish? Yeah, that planning piece has really helped that part for me.
Brian, what about for you?
Well, one of my biggest takeaways from my experience as being originally a coaching member back in season 22, and when I try to convince, it sounds so simple, but I always find myself really working hard to get my coaching members to see this kind of very counterintuitive reframe that self-care time is productive time. We like to think of it as dead time. Oh, that's downtime. It's me time. But I'm like, it's also necessary for us to be productive in the future. I think reframe it as an investment in future productivity. And it's not something a lot of people say, oh, it's good to treat yourself, but it's not really a treat. It's a requirement. It's a need. We need it as much as good nutrition. We need it as much as exercise. We need it as much as all the other basic human needs that help us function and have executive function. And a lot of folks come in here with some interesting kind of guilt and shame complexes about the idea of like, oh, I never have everything done, so I never schedule any self time. It feels guilty or shameful for me to sit down and watch some like binge watch some TV show that I really want to watch, but that I enjoy doing because it feels like I'm doing quote unquote nothing. But if that's an activity that helps you unwind and helps you process, then obviously if you're feeling the need to rest, then you need to rest. Your nervous system has decided, I'm resting now. The difference between where it transitions into numbing is how much we're doing it and for what reasons. If we're doing it to unwind because it's something we enjoy and something that rejuvenates and replenishes us, then it's self-care. But if it is something that is becoming kind of destructive, it's an avoiding behavior. If we say, oh, I'm going to watch some TV, I'm going to watch an old episode, but then we end up watching, 4 seasons with the Netflix auto instant replay.
It's the worst.
And it's now 2 a.m. and you're going to be sleep deprived the next day. That sounds more like a numbing behavior.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, one of the things that we do in group, which I think is so, I think really helpful to really open up the conversation to these things is one, that we acknowledge both as coaches, but for members that we all numb. Every single one of us engages in some form of numbing behaviors. And to sort of normalize that. And how we do that was we will share some of the ways in which we numb and shares like what are those kind of triggers that sort of lead us to those numbing behaviors so we can become more aware and mindful of, in these kinds of situations or scenarios, there is this tendency. And so much of what we talk about in group is how do we identify those tendencies so we can sort of cut it off if it's not serving us. So I think that's a really important piece to that when we talk about the sort of what Brene Brown talks about with shame, that when we shine the light on shame, we can't survive. And when we are all talking about the ways that we all numb in different ways, it sort of frees people to say, you know what, yeah, like I do these things and it's not helping me. And when I do these things sort of like secretly, it's making it even worse because then the shame is just building up, and then I'm having to sort of numb even more because of the shame, and it does create this sort of very vicious cycle. But one of the key things that we really distinguish when we're talking about numbing versus self-care is sometimes we won't know which is which until after, right? How do we feel after the fact? And really like, tracking our energy and really looking at our mood and our emotions and how we're able to sort of show up for the things that we are trying to do. Because that's the only way we really know if what we're doing is effective is through hindsight. Not, it's not necessarily through foresight. We can make guesses, and often we are making these guesses. But not all self-care things are just relaxing. There's plenty of things that I do in the realm that I call self-care that I actually don't enjoy doing at all. Like making my lunch, like making my lunch, I find really annoying because I make a salad that has all kinds of stuff in it all the time. And so but I do that because not doing that means I'm going to be running out and getting some crap to eat, and I'm going to feel bad, right? Like physically feel bad from, eating not good food. And so things like that, things like planning, things like getting my ass to bed, and these are like common things that people struggle with. So when we were talking about this in the coaching groups, we normalize that we all have these sort of things that we do that we know aren't great for us. But then even for a lot of people, identifying this as, oh, this is numbing. I thought it was just avoidance. And absolutely, this is overlap. But I think when people get this language around it, they're able to sort of see it more clearly and without as much judgment, self-judgment, or shame. What are you seeing in your groups with that?
Well, in the past, I will share that, for one thing, some of my coachees in many sections have said, "Oh, I just thought I was going shopping. I didn't realize it was in response or reaction to something." And they start, you see the wheels turn, you can see it in their eyes, them going, because somebody else might share, well, I, retail therapy, and yeah, and I don't really have the money to spend, or I'm just going and buying things on the clearance aisle that I don't really need. Um, and then you see the couple other people going, oh, is that why I'm doing that? So they're all of a sudden learning that activities that they do, and they try to, count backwards kind of thing and go, what happened right before that? What happened right before that? Why am I doing that? Oh my gosh, that's the trigger. It's helping them find out what triggers are for them. One of the things that I point out that is just big to me in general is I like to distinguish between self love and self care, because like you said, a lot of self-care, there are some things that we don't want to do. I have sensory issues. Yeah, I want to feel clean. I hate I hate most of the shower. I mean, I just do. I don't like the way it hits me. I can't ever get the temp. I'm always like, oh, that's too hot. Oh, that's too cold. Oh, wait, that's in my face. And I never realized that I had an aversion to it. Um, and so I think that's one reason I would stay in there too long. Because once I was in there, I was like, okay, good. But I don't want to get out now, because then I have to do the drying off part. And that feels weird too. And so for me, that never felt like what I thought the definition of self care was, which was things I love to do. And you hear, so it's different for everybody. So to me, self love is finding that space, that you don't necessarily have to do, but doing it is so good. And self care to me is kind of the maintenance things that we do, that we like exercise. Once I'm exercising, I'm fine. It's the activation to get there, even if it's a dance class sometimes. So sometimes it's that setup that's the hard thing that we avoid. So that's why I like that planner part for me in particular. And I've heard some of those things that they didn't realize what kind of activities were, can be categorized as that in their lives.
You know what else can be categorized as self-care and can help you make huge strides in your productivity too? It's our coaching and accountability groups. Summer sessions start the second week in July, and our next registration event is this Friday, June 7th at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 Eastern. While early registration is over, you can register this Friday, next Friday, the 14th of June, or the Wednesday after that, June 19th, and enroll for just $11.99. Or you could put it off a little bit longer and join one of the 3 registration events we will host the week of June 24th, and you enroll for $13.99. The earlier you register, the more you will save. To get started, go to coachingrewired.com, add your name to the interest list so you can start pre-registering today. Invest in your future. And if you are in the U.S., qualified applicants can use PayPal credit to pay over 6 months interest-free, which is pretty darn sweet. Not in the U.S. or can't use PayPal credit? We also have a 3-month payment plan option as well. This can make investing in you and your future even easier. Say yes to coaching as self-care, and say yes to getting your ADHD rewired. Go to coachingrewired.com to get started. That's coachingrewired.com. Add your name to the interest list. And now back to the roundtable. Why don't I share what we share in group around these sort of definitions? Because I think that there's a lot of different working definitions out there. But these are definitions that I've come up with. So self-care I define as deliberate actions that, when taken, restore and maintain physical, mental, and emotional well-being and vitality in order to show up in the world as our most authentic and courageous self. And, the key point here is deliberate actions. It's about intentionality. Where numbing I define as actions taken in an attempt to relieve stress and restore well-being, but the actions do not result in an actual increased ability to take on the challenges that led to the numbing behavior. Furthermore, numbing behaviors often leave us feeling more depleted and drained rather than recharged. And I think that even sometimes when I'm doing something intentionally, if I do it longer than I intended, then it's like, yeah, and a common example that I think a lot of us experience is, I'm just going to take a 10-minute Facebook break. Right. And so if we think about like our energy as like a thermometer, right, or a gas meter, and so if the idea of going on Facebook restores 1 bar of sort of like energy juice, getting off of Facebook often requires 2 or 3 bars of that energy juice. And so when we realize like, yeah, it's enjoyable in the moment, but the actual transitioning off of it and stopping that sort of digital dopamine scroll, right? It ends up that it's a net loss. And so it's looking at things like that and say, yeah, I like that. It feels good in that moment, but as a net, is this actually helping me? So what were some of the things that in your sections were you finding either were resonating or were people struggling with?
I think almost every section, it is that discovery of, oh, we call that numbing. I know it's like I'm giving my brain a break, but in the end, I know it's not helping me. So it can't be self-care, but they didn't have terminology to use around it then. So I think that's one of the big takeaways that happened for several people in each section that I have worked with.
And one of the light bulbs that always goes off in my section is when I ask folks to consider who relates to the following statement. Sometimes I do like numbing behaviors, I go on too long, and I perceive that as a function of willpower. If only I had more willpower, I would be doing my productive work instead of sitting here watching TV. It's because of my defective character, my innate traits. And when I say, what if I told you it's actually based in our biology? And that's when I see people start perking up. And then I explain to them there's the role of like the way our brains regulate dopamine and how we have to get I know this is kind of tangential to our, not from this week, but another topic, IBN News, how we can get our emotional systems engaged in there to help jump us. But like when I explained that, like, yeah, this is a function of the way our brain regulates dopamine. It's an expression of that. It's not about your willpower. And if you are needing this rest, if you're taking this rest, you probably need it. But how do we break out of it? And people really resonate with that. I see the light bulbs go off because many people, even people who don't usually aren't immediately articulating that point of view, it's so ingrained in us that we think it's a willpower issue, that we are just not as we just don't have a strong desire to do things if we are being caught up in these behaviors. And it's really not that. It's not a quality of our character. It's it's more of an expression of our biology. Sorry, I'm talking a little quickly today. I'm over-caffeinated.
Over-caffeinated Brian. I was like, okay.
I love that, by the way. I love the way you phrased that because like we always say, we're coaches, but at the end of the day, we still have ADHD. And I've been struggling with something. And that was part of my negative cognition was I don't have willpower. And I know it's a distorted type of cognition for me. And now not only have I, worked with my therapist to reframe it, now I even have a little extra information, even though I've heard all this before and when we go into our own things, in our own world, we forget some of those things. So it's nice to hear it come back at us from someone else. And so now I not only have a new reframe, but I have a new supportive definition of that. Now I really don't want to say I don't have willpower because that's nothing to do with it. That's good. I love that. That's great.
And with the stories that we sort of tell ourselves, this is something I shared with my group, is that a couple of years ago when I first started moving my sections to be later in the either later in the morning or early in the afternoon, part of that was I had this intention that I wanted to get out and be outside more and do more physical activity outside. And so I had this intention that I started doing a later group. And part of my plan was this is before I discovered pickleball. My other weird sport that I really like is frisbee golf, right? And so I was like, my plan was I was going to be playing frisbee golf in the morning and then going to the office. And I remember just thinking the first day I was out playing pickleball or frisbee golf, and it was in the morning. And I remember feeling this huge sense of guilt. And I'm like, I have all these things I need to be doing. And I just allowed myself to just notice the story and go, huh. And just realizing how ingrained that is for so many of us, that like, let's do this isn't done. There's tasks that require our responding, right? And I think one of the things that I think is helpful in the group setting is talking about that and normalizing that experience. Because just because I had the thought and had an uncomfortable feeling about it didn't mean I was doing anything wrong. And I think that's such an important part of the nuanced discussion about when we are engaging in self-care. Like, a lot of those old scripts are going to try to get their voices heard internally, right? But just because we think it doesn't mean it's true, right? And I think that's such an important part of that.
How many times as kids are we told, oh, you can't go out and play, which is a child's job, by the way, because that's how they grow and learn, until you do this work, until you do your chores, until you do this. I've had parents sometimes flip it around for them. And for certain kids, it works better.
Yeah.
So I think some of that is ingrained in us too, in different, milieus.
Yeah. And then we also talk about too, like, is it ever okay to numb? And did you have that conversation, Brian, in your section?
Yeah. And I would say basically numb happens. Like, again, it doesn't even rhyme or anything, but you know exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Numb happens.
I love
it's
that.
More
right.
How do we react to it when it does happen, and what do we learn from it when we realize, oh yeah, I numbed yesterday. I'm gonna let the disappointment around that go, and like, what do I learn about that? How do I adapt to, like, what triggered that? Why am I getting enough sleep? Am I getting enough rest? Am I stressed out about something at work and not really dealing with it? Why am I numbing? That's one of our core concepts, core underlying principles here, is that we approach everything with curiosity. And it's looking, like, instead of saying, oh man, I lost that day due to numbing, it's like, well, why did my body feel a need to numb that day? Am I something off emotionally? Is something off physically? Am I too fatigued? Am I unhappy? Am I depressed? Like, as long as we learn, even a numbing day that happens is still an opportunity to learn, to adapt, to gain from it. The only real waste is if we just turn our back on it and internalize that little message of insecurity and that willpower message again. That's the only way to really lose, is to walk away with that without learning something from it.
Well, so what we talk about in week 7 is our legacies, and we look at, like, the real, like, we ask the question, what do you want to do before you die, right? And this is this question that we often avoid, and like we maybe think about in this sort of abstract way. And what we do is we bring the abstract to the concrete, and we, from dreaming of our bucket lists to, what would we do if we were told that we have, a week or a month or a year to live. And so we talk about that in week 7 because, intentional lives take work. And it is amazing when we are really intentional and learn boundaries around time and learn how to really do the self-care stuff. Like, we can do incredible, amazing things. And, you look at your day and your week, the things that you thought you'd get done might have taken you longer. But when we start dreaming big picture, it is amazing how much we can really actually get done with the right supports and structures. And that's what we help our members with. So we're going to talk about that more deeply next week on the Coaches Roundtable. And, because of podcast time, I just want to publicly wish Brian a good trip. He is doing the AIDS Life Cycle Ride, which is a week-long bike ride that raises money for LGBTQ healthcare. For the 3rd year in a row, which was one of his bucket list goals when he was a member of the coaching groups, which is just, I get so excited about that for you, Brian. So I'm so happy for you. And speaking of LGBTQ issues, it is Pride Month. And I am teaming up with the fabulous and queer Chris Wang from Shimmer and a few of our queer neurodivergent colleagues for Neurodivergent Pride, a Pride Month panel discussion. This panel brings together neurodivergent voices from the LGBTQ community to share their voices, stories, challenges, and successes. By highlighting the intersection of LGBTQ plus issues and neurodivergent identities, this event emphasizes the importance of awareness and combating stigma. We are aiming to showcase the diverse experiences of the queer community and neurodivergent individuals, fostering a deeper understanding and advocating for a more inclusive society. And everyone is welcome. And we are doing it on June 16th at 1:30 p.m. Pacific, 4:30 Eastern. Go register at ADHDrewired.com/Pride 2024. And if you want to see the panel discussion, but you can't make it live, we will send out the recording to anyone who's registered. That's ADHDrewired.com/Pride 2024. And if you are on the email list, on my email list, we will be sending out something soon to our email list. So watch your inbox and our social pages, or go now to ADHDrewired.com/Pride 2024, and happy Pride, y'all. And come check out ADHD Rewired's virtual co-working community at adultstudyhall.com. We have guided sessions and a 24/7 quiet workroom. It's only $19.99 a month and free to try for the first week. And if you have been enjoying this content, this would be a great time to become a patron over at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. Your support will help me hire a new editor for the podcast, because right now I'm doing the editing. So if the audio isn't ideal and you love the podcast, become a patron. It would really help. And also, don't miss your chance to get your ADHD Rewired this summer. Go to coachingrewired.com to learn more about our coaching and accountability groups. Our next registration event is this Friday, June 7th at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 Eastern. And ChatGPT, I'm recording you right now on my podcast. And could you give listeners who may be have been thinking about joining our coaching groups for a while now, based on everything that I've ever shared with you about our groups, can you offer a compelling reason to that listener who's been looking for a sign to let them know that this is the season that they should join our coaching groups?
Absolutely, Eric. Hey, listeners. If you've been thinking about joining ADHD Rewired's coaching groups, now is the perfect time. Eric's program has helped over 1,200 people over the past decade, creating a supportive and thriving community that understands the unique challenges you face. With a track record of success and a recently reduced price that hasn't been this low since 2017, this is a rare opportunity to invest in yourself and your future. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Take this as your sign to join and experience the transformative power of connection, accountability, and expert guidance. Your future self will thank you.
I don't think I could have said that better myself.
I'm glad you liked it. It's all about conveying the value and impact of what you offer. Is there anything else you'd like to add or tweak before you record?
Oh, this is all being recorded right now. Since this is coming out at the beginning of Pride Month, I was wondering if you can sing a song about the intersectionality of ADHD and neurodivergence with LGBTQ related issues.
I'd love to give it a go. Here's a little something for Pride Month. In a world so diverse, where colors all blend, there's a place for each heart where all can mend. With ADHD minds that race and soar, and LGBTQ souls always wanting more, we find strength in our stories, our battles, and our pride, in the intersections where our truths reside. From the struggles we face to the love that we find, together we shine with a brilliant mind. So here's to the fighters, the dreamers, the bold. In the spectrum of life, our stories are told. With love and acceptance, we rise and we stand, neurodivergent hearts, hand in hand. Happy Pride Month, everyone.
Damn, that was awesome. All right, we will catch you back here next week. Thanks, everyone.